everyone. Welcome to Meet Your Farmer, a podcast by Farm Foundation. I'm your host, Naomi Mijan. If you don't know Farm Foundation, we're a nonprofit located in the Chicago area, working to promote understanding at the intersections of agriculture and society. We've been accelerating solutions for agriculture since the 1930s, and we're excited to have you join us for this episode. The goal of this podcast is to help you get to know just a little bit more about the American farmers who are producing the food, fuel, and fiber we all use every day. I'm excited to welcome Hannah Borg onto the show. Hannah is a sixth-generation farmer from Wakefield, Nebraska. She's at Borg Farms, and they raise crops, cattle, and chickens for Costco. After attending the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and studying agricultural communications, Hannah returned home to the family business in 2019. She's also an accomplished photographer and is currently in the 2024 cohort of the Farm Foundation Young Farmer Accelerator Program. Thanks for making the time to chat with me, Hannah.
Thanks so much for having me.
I was looking around on your Instagram and looking around on social media. I love your photography style. Just love the quality that you bring to the photos.
So you called me accomplished. I'm not sure what you had to do to use that word. I'm not sure if I'm accomplished, but it's just kind of a side hobby, creative hustle off the farm, revenue making project that I do that has just organically grown over the years.
Well, I'll say you're a really good photographer.
Okay, thank you. I like that better.
So you grew up on the farm, you say with a feedlot out the front window and a cornfield out back. And that's probably not how most people listening to this podcast grew up. So I was just wondering, as you know, you went to university, you've spent time off the farm. I'm just curious, what have you noticed sticks out to non-farmers about how you grew up?
So my family hosts a lot of people on the farm that aren't around farms, know nothing. In fact, this weekend my mom hosted, my mom has a bad habit or maybe good habit of anyone she meets, she's like, you can come out to the farm, we'd love to give you a tour. And some people take her up on that. And this weekend, a couple from Omaha, they're entrepreneurs. They've lived in Nebraska their whole life, and they took my mom up on the offer to have a tour of the farm on Sunday. So we've done that a lot over the years. And I think the feedback that we get, well, specifically this couple on Sunday, they were saying like, I've lived in Nebraska my whole life and I had no idea this is what farms are. And I think that's often like people just don't know. And it goes both ways. You know, a lot of times there's people coming out to the farm and I have no idea their world. And so we all kind of get into our own lanes. We don't lift our eyes that often. And so when people do get to come on the farm, they're just so amazed. They're amazed about how big the equipment are. They're amazed at all the details and systems that go into raising livestock. They're amazed about just the generational aspect because we're really proud of that. I'm sixth generation on the farm, like you mentioned. And so I think it's just been fun to see people's reactions. Just their eyes are open. They're like, whoa, I had no idea. And I called it my mom's bad habit of opening up our farm doors, but it's probably a good one over the years. We just, we love to show off what we have because we know it's pretty unique.
Yeah. I was listening to another podcast that you had recorded, and you were talking about how growing up, it sounded like you have a lot of liberty to just, because your family is nearby. I'm not sure how that distance is, but you were talking about, I don't know if it was an ATV, you were just hopping on it and you could go over to visit your grandma. And I was like, wow, that's so different from anything that I experienced growing up.
Yeah, that's really a core memory from my childhood. So my grandparents live about 3-4 miles from our home place. And my grandpa passed away 14 years ago, and my grandma's 90 years old and she still lives on the home place. But some of those early childhood memories of freedom is getting on the four-wheeler and going down the road to go to grandma's house. There's a minimum maintenance road and kind of a back way to get there. So the likelihood of meeting anyone on the road was really slim to none. But yeah, those are our first, kind of chances at freedom, and mom would just say, go over to grandma's, and we'd hang out at grandma and grandpa's all day and then be home before it got dark out, before you had to turn the lights on the four-wheeler. But yeah, we drive a lot of four-wheelers and side-by-sides. That's, oftentimes the main mode of transportation. And especially in the summer, we just go on rides. Like, you could easily take a vehicle, but there's something about going down the road on a four-wheeler that is just a little bit sweeter. And yeah, I've gotten to do that from my childhood. And that's another thing, like that's a normal for me. And to have that freedom to, go down the road a few miles. And I know that's not normal for everyone, but it really worked out for us. It gave us the freedom, and there was safety nets within, mom knew where we were at and where we were going, and grandma knew that we were heading back home. And yeah, it was a really sweet childhood growing up on the farm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That sounds, like as a kid, I would have been all about it.
And I don't realize that's not normal until I talk to other people, right? Because we, even at my grandparents' place, like we had the run of a whole section. Like we could go across the road into the pasture. There's a pond there. We could go to the creek and play. They would check in on us every once in a while. But I think that freedom is just really essential to a childhood where you get to explore through creative play. I'm one of 10 cousins. I'm the oldest out of 10 cousins, and we all grew up close. And so, there's always cousins around to play. It was just, I don't want to over romanticize it, but I'm romanticizing it because it was a really sweet childhood.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned, and I mentioned the sixth generation, you're the sixth generation on the farm. So the farm was started 135 years ago. Is that the farm you're on now, like the actual farm, or was that your grandparents' farm?
My grandparents' place. It was 140 years ago that it was started. And that is still in the family. And that's the few miles away that I was referencing earlier that I take the four-wheeler to. So my grandma, 90 years old, she still lives there. She is actively involved in all of our lives. She kind of knows what's going on every day. She is starting to slow down a teeny tiny bit, which is kind of, it's a hard step to go into as a family. But she still makes meals for the guys. So right now we're in the field harvesting. And they all have lunch boxes in their tractors and trucks today, and those were all made by Grandma. So Grandma gets up. She loves to have a job to do. She claims she doesn't like making meals, and I don't think she likes making the meals, but I think she likes having that to do. And yeah, so another layer of explanation of how the family works is my dad is one of four brothers, and the four brothers all farm individually but together. And I know that does not make sense. But there's four Borg brothers all within a few miles, and we all have our own separate operations. Like at my mom and dad, our place here, we have our feedlot, we have our livestock, and each brother has that separate place. But right now there's four brothers working together and two nephews working together in the field. And I know that's unique. I got to stay around and be on the livestock side right now, so that's why I'm not in the field. But it is, I'm starting to ramble a little bit because I just love talking about my family. But at that home place, that is a home base for the Borg brothers. And if something breaks down, that shop is full of things. That's where we go to. But then there's also four different individual brother places, and that's where I'm at today.
Got it. So I've just been reflecting on farmers always tell you what generation farmer they are. I'm just curious about that dynamic, and especially being a sixth generation, that's such a long tradition. So what does it mean to you? Like, how does that inform how you think about yourself to be the sixth generation farmer on the farm that was started, over 100 years ago?
I love that question because I didn't get to be the sixth generation on this farm by accident. I think farmers, when we do, it's pretty common for me. I'm sixth generation on my family's farm. It's common for me to say that. And it's my dad's the fifth generation. That didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen by accident that my grandpa was the fourth generation. And, it won't happen by accident if there's a 7th generation on the farm. So there's a sense of pride that goes into passing that land down generation to generation, because it is so hard to do it. It takes so many intentional conversations, hard conversations sometimes, planning ahead, just managing all the different things that come into estate planning and, successfully passing down the land from generation to generation. So right now, the land is only in 5th generation, or well, 4th. My grandma, there's land in her name and there's land in my dad's name. So in reality, I'm only 6th generation to work on this farm. I'm not 6th generation to own this farm. And there's a difference in that. But someday my brother, sister, and I will own this farm, and that won't happen by accident. And I'm really proud to say that we do have those hard conversations. Just yesterday, I was riding with my dad in the grain cart. I don't see my dad much right now because he leaves for the field about 7:30, gets home at dark. Like, I'm not seeing him much unless I go to the field, which is totally fine. But we were having conversations at the grain cart yesterday of, I'm not even sure how we got on the topic, but it's within casual conversations, us thinking about someday it will look like this, or this is what's going well today. These are things that we can't change today, the different dynamics that we can't change today. So I think we've gotten to a better place about that. It used to be kind of a bigger deal to talk about, what does someday look like? But it happens in casual conversations of like, someday it'll look like this. Someday we'll do this. And I think that's why my family's been able to pass it on from generation to generation. Because I actually asked my dad yesterday, and it's so random we're having this conversation today because I wasn't thinking about this when I was talking to my dad. But I was like, do you remember having conversations with your dad, like how we're having conversations today? And he said no, but he said Grandpa talked about estate planning and transitional through his actions more so. Like, he was really intentional about planning that generational transition more through his actions than his words. My dad and mom, they talk about things, more than just showing things. And so every generation's different. My generation will look different when we, hopefully, God willing, pass it on to the next generation. So it just happens with a lot of work and a lot of effort, and there's a lot of pride. There's just so much pride that goes into building something and maintaining it. And I think that's why a lot of farmers are just so prideful about, hey, I'm 3rd. Even to be 2nd generation on a farm is a big deal. And I don't take that lightly that I can say that I'm 6th generation.
Yeah, for sure. As you were talking about that, I was just thinking about all the challenges that farmers in the United States have, faced within that time, and like the farm crisis in the 80s, and the fact that you guys pulled through all that, and you're still doing it.
I still hear stories about my families from the 80s. I think that will always be in the back of the minds of people that were farming through the 80s. I hope that me and my siblings don't have to live through something like that. And I think there's probably, more things in place that it won't ever get that bad. I choose to believe that. But my dad makes references to the 80s quite often. Well, I guess depending on the subject. But yeah, it's something that haunts him. Like, my family did almost lose some land, and he doesn't know how Grandpa was able to make it work. And it's stories like that, like, my grandparents did everything they could to keep the land, to keep the bank away from taking away their land. And that is something that is in my bones, that I know that I can do the same someday too, of like, I will do everything in my power to work hard to make sure this land stays in my family.
Yeah. So at your current operation, it's you raise cattle and chickens, and I'm assuming the crops that you raise are to go to feed the cattle and chicken?
Yeah, so we have about 1,000 head feedlot, and we've actually we have it full of calves right now. We've gotten like 10 and a half loads within the last 2 weeks. And so all the feed. Let me back up. In our feedlot, we get them about 550 to 650 pounds, 700 pounds. I can see the chart in the background. Like one group came in at 635 pounds, another group came in at 710 pounds. So we get them as wean calves. All of our cattle come in from South Dakota and Montana. We got a group in from Wyoming this year. But anyways, all of our cattle come in as wean calves, and then we feed them to 1,000 pounds, and we take them to another feedlot to be finished there. And then we buy yearlings to fill the feedlot again, and then we finish them to finishing or like fattening weight, and then send them to the processor from here. And all the feed that we feed the cattle, we grow within a few miles of the farm. So if you were to look at out this window over here that no one can see, I can see the feed pile, and there's ground alfalfa from a hay field just a few miles from here. We have earlage, silage, and then right now we're feeding our wean calves when they come in for the first few days grass hay that came from a pasture not that far from here. We have rolled corn, and then the only thing in their diet that we don't grow ourselves is the liquid protein, and that's in a tank, and that comes from a town a little ways away. So yeah, we feed all of our cattle, the ingredients that we grow ourselves, and then the manure from the cattle yards go back out to the field to fertilize the field. And then we also have a small cow-calf herd. My brother and I, mostly my brother has ownership of it, but I have a few cows as well. But I insert myself into the conversation more with cows because I do a lot of the labor with my brother. We have a few pairs that we calve out every year, and we're growing that herd. And I love calving season. Calving season is pretty intense, but it's really fun to bring new life into the world. So we have feedlot cattle, we have cows, and then we also have chickens. So that's the livestock side, and then the crops, the corn, soybeans, and alfalfa. To keep going on more on that point, we're very diversified. For our area, like a lot of people have livestock and crops, but not necessarily to the scale that we do. And when I say scale, like we have, feedlot, cows, chickens, like that's pretty diversified. But earlier we were talking about me being the sixth generation. To get to this point, like you have to understand what traditions are valued. And a tradition that we value as a family is diversification. And so generally when we're making money off of crops, we're generally not making as much money off of cattle, and vice versa. When we're making money off of cattle, we're probably not making as much money on crops. It's, not quite that simplified, but it's a way to deliver it a little bit easier. And so we value a tradition, we value just diversification. And that works really well for our family.
That kind of leads into my next question really well, because thinking about traditions. So I'm assuming the operation has always kind of, I think the chickens are the newest addition, right?
Mm-hmm. The chickens, yeah, kind of really random thing. Costco, we all know the company Costco. Do you shop at Costco?
I do shop at Costco.
Okay.
Do you raise my chickens?
Well, if you're in Chicago, or on the eastern side of the Missouri River, we do not. Okay. So Costco is based out of Seattle, and they said to themselves, like, we want to produce a very consistent product, and that's that $5 chicken. And they landed in Nebraska, and so in Nebraska, they built in Fremont, Nebraska, which is the eastern side of Nebraska, just north of Omaha. They said to themselves that they built a system that's fully integrated. So they have a feed mill, a processing plant, and a hatchery there in Fremont. And then they work with about 100 partners like my family within, 60 miles of Fremont. And so we're considered, partners, contractors, contract growers for them. So we get 60,000 chickens twice a year, and we have them for 5 months at a time. And they're called pullets. And when the pullets leave our place, they go to another farm and they lay eggs. When those eggs are laid, they go to the hatchery in Fremont to be hatched. Those hatched chicks go out to broiler barns, and they get about 6 pounds in 6 weeks and then go back to Fremont to be processed. And then they process about 1 million birds a week in Fremont, and that fills about 20% of Costco's needs for chicken, and that's mostly on the western side of the United States. And so my family knew about this pretty early on and was a cheerleader for it, because rising tide raises all boats. So people were resistant for Costco to come to Fremont, and that's like old news at this point. But because we were early cheerleaders, my dad one time, he just brought up, like, what if we built chicken barns? And it was a way to expand and diversify at a lower risk. So it cost a lot of money to build our barns, but we also know that we're getting paid every week for the next 15 years. If we had put that same amount of investment into building a bigger feedlot, it would be a higher risk. And so it was a way to expand and diversify and take a medium risk instead of high risk. And at the time I was in college, and my dad said to me one day, "Hey, you want a job?" And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And he was essentially offering me a job on the farm. So they had decided to build the barns before they had any kids' input. It was a decision that they made on their own. And, they offered me the job to come back home. And I said yes, because I have really understood my family's history and traditions, and I really value our lifestyle, and I want to be a part of that. And so that yes was pretty easy. Saying yes to coming home to the farm to help raise chickens was not on my radar, but it's worked well for our family. The first few years were really tough, but we got a way bigger handle on it now. And then also, all the litter from the chicken barns goes onto our land as well. So, another big circle of things. But yeah, it sometimes I still have moments of like, man, what am I doing in these chicken barns? Like, this is crazy. I'm a cattle person, not a chicken person. But there's just a lot of things that it really, really fits for our family. And that was, within the values of diversity on the farm, raising chickens fits that. And 5 years, almost 6 years later, like it's been a good expansion for us.
Excellent. I think you've been talking to this throughout, but what's something that particularly makes you proud about what you're doing on your farm?
I have a sense of warmth when I think about like being proud, because again, like we don't get to this point of mom and dad and brother and sister working multiple years on the farm together on accident, right? I've been home for almost 6 years now, and it was rough the first few years. And my brother's been home. He's a few years younger than me, and he graduated high school in 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. So he didn't really leave because college looked really different for him. And so in reality, my brother's been home on the farm full time just as long as I have. And what makes me proud is that we have made it work, right? There's lots of instances that I could bring up of like big fights of disagreements, and it was like, ooh, that was not fun to be a part of, or like, ooh, we should maybe not do, say those things again. But we've gotten to a point where we can address conflict in a little bit more casual way. And again, I keep saying this, but that doesn't happen on accident. Like, it takes intentional effort to have the four of us working together. I have a sister that's 2 years younger than me, and she married a farmer from about 45 minutes away. And he gets to be, they help as often as they can. We see him almost weekly. And so he brings new ideas too. That doesn't happen on accident, that we, can welcome in someone else and their new ideas. And so that's what makes me really proud, is like the intentional family aspect of our operation, because I see other businesses that look like they're booming and the family aspect just doesn't look as strong. We choose family over a lot of things, but we can also discern when we have to make business decisions over family. And those are tough. But if you're if you have intention behind how you're making those decisions, you can say, okay, I'm choosing family here, I'm choosing business here. And at the end of the day, like, got to do best for yourself. And so when I think of being proud, I think of that warmthness of family and choosing each other and still being able to celebrate holidays together. And still, like, my mom makes dinner on Sundays quite often. Like, we can work together all week long and we can still sit down together on a Sunday afternoon and enjoy each other company and talk about other things off the farm. And again, that doesn't happen by accident, and I'm really proud of that.
Can you give an example of what it, because it is unusual for, I'm sure most listeners don't work with their family like you like farmers do. So what is an example of choosing family, or intentionally choosing family, or intentionally choosing business?
This fall, my dad had to make a decision where he hired out a job that generally could have been done by by another family member. And so he had to make a decision of, I'm choosing business because I want this done at a certain time versus waiting for it to be done by family. And that was a hard call because my dad doesn't like making those kind of decisions, but he knew like it was best for the business for him to have something done by a certain date. And we hired that out versus doing it in-house. So that was a recent example of business over family. But there's a lot more examples of family over business. My parents are very generous in how they help my brother and I out, in terms, not only financially, but also like with time. So my parents are intentionally choose, like, maybe they aren't going to, how should I say it? Like, we don't get handouts, but when I have cattle in the feedlot, some of my labor is paid for by feed. And so, or like my feed bill is paid for my labor. That's more of a trade, but my parents could be like, no, we want this money from you. But we will also pay for your labor and feed. That's something that they're choosing family over business to help my brother and I get started, because, we're not starting from much, but we are starting with a lot of opportunity for my parents. And that opportunity, again, is intentional from them. If we want to help our kids out, just like we were helped out. And that's, their own conversations of how they make those decisions. And so, yeah, there's lots of examples. I think we have more examples of choosing family over business, but every once in a while, business decisions have to be made over family, and we talk about it and we know why those decisions are made.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. So you're sixth generation. What would you want I don't know how many generations in the future 6 generations would be, but what about your great-grandchildren, that far into the future? What would you want them to know about you as a farmer?
I want them to know me first. I got to know my great-grandma. She lived till she was 102, and she lived by herself till she was 100. And I got to know her stories. We have a lot of them recorded. My mom and dad own the land that she grew up on, and so I have memories of her, showing us around that place. So through the lens that I know my great grandma and I have really good memories of her, I hope that I'm afforded to know my great grandchildren as well. And something I've mentioned, we value documentation in our family. My grandpa took a lot of photographs. My grandma did all the organizing of them. She labeled everything. She dated everything. And now I'm doing the same. I'm taking photos throughout the year, of the upgrades that we're making or of the changes, and I'm printing them off. So I hope that I'm doing a good enough job today of memory preservation that my great-grandchildren can sit in a home someday and look through the photos that I'm taking right now. And in fact, so Our harvest crew hopes to be done today. We hope we're on our last day of harvest, if all goes well. And right now it's my dad and his 3 brothers. So it's 4 brothers and my brother and cousin. So there's 6 Borgs working together. And I desperately want to get a picture of all 6 of them working. But to do that, I have to stop the operation. And I'm not sure if I can get that done today because they want to get done before the end of the day. And so even though I was talking to my dad on the phone before we started this, my dad will not be excited if I stop the crew. But even though it's such a hassle to stop and take the picture, like I hope that's a picture that's that's a picture worthwhile taking so that my great grandkids someday can be like, oh, that's Hannah and all the guys in the picture, and they know who they are just through photo documentation.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is,
because I'm looking in our office. There's a picture of my grandma and the 4 brothers, one of them being my dad, and I took this picture maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And all harvest, I said, okay, on the last day of harvest, I'm bringing grandma out to the field and we're going to take this picture. And everyone rolled their eyes, and they were, pretended like they were annoyed to take the picture. And I stuck to my guns. I said, we're going to take this picture. And sure enough, after I got the picture, everyone's like, oh, can we see the picture? They all liked it. And it's funny, right? We started this conversation saying I do photography for other people, and it's way easier for me to take pictures of other families than my own, because other families, they're paying me to be there, and so they're bought in of stopping to take the picture, whereas my family's not necessarily bought in for me stopping the combine to take the picture. But I take what I can. I try to take as many pictures as I can throughout the year and get them printed off. And I hope I'm doing the right thing so that my grandkids and great grandkids will know the life that I lived and the traditions and people that they came from.
Yeah, no, that stuff is important. Yep. Well, Hannah, those were the questions that I had prepared, but as you were thinking about this conversation that we were going to have, is there anything that I forgot to ask you, or anything that you kind of want to share about being a farmer here in the United States in this current moment?
You kind of pitched the conversation of letting people meet farmers, and it's so interesting to me because I live in a world of farming. That's all I know. And so to think about people not knowing a farmer blows my mind. So I guess if you're listening and you don't know a farmer, just trust that there's people like me out there that are growing a really good product for you to eat. I think there's some bigger conversations happening right now that make farmers not look super great in terms of the health of our country. I want you to know that, talk to farmers, look on social media. It's so easy to find people that are doing what I'm doing. If you want to know about your food, go directly to the source, right? If you want to learn about the beef that you're consuming from a grocery store, you can reach out to someone like me. So the beef that I'm raising with my family, that we're feeding from feed that we're growing within a few miles of the farm, is going to a big processor called Tyson, not that far away from here. So right now, big companies are, generally under attack that they aren't as healthy as smaller ones. And I don't always agree with that, because we're a small family farm selling our product to a big company, and our beef is going to end up in a grocery store next to another farm's beef. We open this conversation, we invite people out to the farm all the time. You can find me on social media, and I'd love to show you around the farm. It's literally my favorite place in the whole wide world. I'm proud of what we do here, and I really believe in what we do, and we can back up everything that we do. And I think majority, you're not in this business if it's not working, right? You're not in the business of farming because you are trying to raise unhealthy cattle or trying to make your soils better. Because or if you're not trying to make your soils better, and if you're not trying to raise healthy cattle, like, you're not going to be in this business. And I don't think that narrative is out there, because sometimes it's uncomfortable to put the conversation of money next to farming, but we have to make money so that this is a business. But the better our soil is, the healthier our cattle are, the more money we're going to be able to make. And, we can grow through that way. We have to make money so we can expand and diversify and continue all these traditions and values that we've been raised on. So I just think that like what you said, I think the narrative is being shifted a little bit, and it worries me a little bit, because it's like, we're a small farmer and we sell to a big packer. I think I trust all the food that's going to that packer because of the systems that are in place. Anyways, I could ramble on and on, but I'm just proud of what we do, who we are, and thanks for talking to me today and being curious and, asking me some questions. And hopefully I didn't say anything that I get myself in trouble with my family specifically.
Well, from my perspective, I thought you were spot on. So thank you so much, Hannah. This has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate you making the time. And again, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks to you for listening to this episode of the Meet Your Farmer podcast from Farm Foundation. Be sure to check out the other episodes in this season. If you have recommendations for farmers we should have on the show, or have any other feedback, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe and share the podcast with your network. Farm Foundation is all about creating trust and understanding at the intersections of agriculture and society. You can learn more about our work at farmfoundation.org. Until next time.